Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the Next Game, New Game podcast. Matt Catrillo here with you, and joining us for the first time this season is our man from SteelersDepot.com, Alex Kozor. Alex, welcome in. How was training camp at Latrobe this year? Lots that happened, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's always a lot of fun. Now the team's out of camp, and we're trucking towards the regular season.
And you took a little trip to Heinz Field, too, the other night, I saw.
Yeah, they had the Family Fest practice, which technically wasn't part of camp, but they had it out there, which is always a cool environment to go check out, and it was a good practice.
Yeah, it definitely seemed that way from all the pictures you put up on Twitter. So let's jump right into it. We'll start with the news that kind of broke camp last week was Big Ben going down, was put into the concussion protocol, didn't play the other night, but obviously he's been practicing full since, so the Steelers kind of survived a little scared there.
Yeah, it was definitely a weird play. It was the last practice of training camp. He got stepped on by his right tackle, Marcus Gilbert. I guess he fell back and hit his head. I didn't really see it happen, but he's fine. He did not even suffer a concussion protocol just to get checked for it. Did not have a concussion. Go play against the Titans, so no worries there.
And that is certainly good signs to hear for the Steelers as the Steelers host the Titans on Saturday night. And as we kind of get ready for that game, Alex, you've seen 2 preseason games. You've seen all of training camp at Latrobe so far. A couple of guys that Ian and I were talking about last week that have stood out to us. I think the emergence of James Conner having a full training camp where he's fully healthy, I think, you're really starting to see the kind of player he was at Pitt, running in between the tackles. Steelers are also starting to put him out wide in the slot. I found that very interesting. James Washington, of course, has emerged as one of the top talent from the camp this year, and he's had a great preseason as well. Damon Patterson I liked a lot. He performed well against the Eagles, was a little quiet last week in Green Bay. Mason Rudolph, I thought, had a pretty good camp so far, especially the time that you and I got together in Latrobe. So, overall, quick thoughts, what you saw from the first 2 games.
Yeah, I thought it was a good camp for most of the rookies. I think you have a starting receiver in James Washington for when the Steelers go with a 3-receiver, 11 personnel. He struggled a little bit early on, which is natural for any receiver, but I think his progress has accelerated far beyond what probably even the team has expected. His physicality, his ability to make tough catches, catch in traffic, kind of move around the formation, something he didn't do a lot at Oklahoma State. I think he's been good. Terrell Edmonds has been a little bit more up and down, but you see some of the natural talent, some of the natural cover ability that's, I think, unusual for a safety. Packers game was a bit rough for him, but that's growing pains that any rookie's going to have, so I'm not too worried about that. James Conner, like you mentioned, I think was one of the stars of camp. We knew what he could do as a runner, but you're seeing the more well-roundedness to his game, ability to catch, ability to block. He lost a little bit of weight. He came in, I think, in better shape and looked the part. Damone Patterson from Youngstown State, a rookie, inconsistent. I don't think he's going to be a 53-man roster guy, but that's another practice squad guy you can have there for a year and kind of stash and develop. So some intrigue there. And then Mason Rudolph, who I think, again, has been up and down like a lot of rookie quarterbacks are, but I think a guy that has good poise, command, again, someone that got better as camp went along. Ball security is an issue for him. He's got to take care of the football better. Too many turnovers, 8 picks in camp. Threw a pick against the Packers for a pick 6, had some fumbles, and just a little bit of tentativeness in his game. But I think you see some of the baseline traits, a good enough arm, some leadership, good command of the offense that can potentially make him a starter down the road, but we're a long ways away from that.
And see, there it is right there, Alex. You mentioned the word poise, and this is something I always want the biggest takeaway to be when evaluating a young quarterback that you bring in. And I mentioned this in talking about Nate Sudfeld in his first 2 games in the preseason for the Eagles. You mentioned that with Mason Rudolph here. The fact that he gets his first NFL start at Lambeau Field, everybody dreams of starting a game there, whether it's preseason or regular season, and you're trying to make a name for yourself. You know you might be the quarterback of the future, and you get in there, first play, I should say, bang, pick 6 the other way, and you're already down 7-0. That was your first pass. For him to bounce back like that, and again, as you mentioned, wasn't perfect. He has his turnover issues that he has to correct, but the fact that he was able to bounce back and lead a couple of nice touchdown drives, make a couple other good throws down the stretch in that game the other night, despite it being a loss, I thought that was a really good step for him forward, and I think the Steelers really, I think, should be pleased with that at least.
Yeah, I think you can take you can take away some good things with bad performances or bad moments, because quarterback is all about having a short-term memory. And I'm almost glad that pass got pick 6, because Rudolph goes right back on the field right after that. It wasn't like, okay, you got to sit on the sidelines and stew on it for 10 minutes. while the Packers have the football, and then you can kind of bounce back. So it's literally you put it out of your mind because you have to, because you're on the field within 2 minutes of throwing that pass. And then he led a touchdown drive that I thought was a good pass, a good ball to Juju Smith-Schuster. That was solid ball placement in a tight red zone window. So again, yeah, is he going to be a starter? Is he going to be a franchise guy? I have no idea. We are just entirely too early into his career to make that assumption about him, or really any rookie quarterback so far. But I like what I've seen so far from his progression and that poise, and it's confidence that doesn't get into arrogance, and that's a fine line to walk sometimes. But I think he walks it very well. He's comfortable and confident in himself, but he understands he has a lot to learn, and I think he's a guy willing to learn.
Right, I think that's a great point you bring up, because when something like that happens, you don't want it to linger. I think if you're a coaching staff, and I'm glad that happened. But either way, for a guy to come back like that right off the bat and lead a couple nice throws and a couple nice drives, as you mentioned, to Juju Smith-Schuster, that's great. And I think the fact, and we've talked about this before, the fact that he has his teammate from Oklahoma State and James Washington there, and he's having a good camp, and plus, I think he's also becoming developing some nice chemistry too with Juju Smith-Schuster. You mentioned the touchdown connection that they had against Green Bay last week, and then the practice you and I were at towards the end of training camp when he threw that dime into triple coverage right where only where Juju can get it. So I think that's a good sign too going forward, that he's starting to develop some chemistry with some of these guys.
Yeah, obviously when you get to play with your teammate from college, it's pretty unique, and they've hooked up a lot as he's kind of gotten some more work with some of the twos and even some work with the ones late in camp. You've gotten to throw to guys like Juju. So yeah, I mean, that's always good to have. Now, defensively, just to kind of touch on that real quick, there's been a lot of problems with the defense. You have some worries about Morgan Burnett has not had a great start, and he's been nicked up. Just kind of has always been a problem for him up in Green Bay. The big bugaboo is going to be that inside linebacker spot. John Bostic is almost certainly going to be the starter week one. Definitely will be the guy if they stay in-house. They could try to make a move for someone outside the organization. I think that's going to be tough to do because I just don't know who you're going to bring in to start. But we knew it was going to be extremely difficult to even just come close to replacing Shazier. But I'm just not confident that they have a guy that can even remotely get to that level and be someone you can trust to cover and someone that can be a true 3-down guy. I mean, I didn't mind the John Bostic signing. I get it. He's been a 3-down guy before. He's been a 100% snap guy before. But man, I'm really worried about that spot.
Yeah, I am too. Just from a couple of quick observations I've taken, I haven't watched every single snap of Steelers preseason so far, and practice, of course, but this game coming up here against the Titans, of course, it's always important because it's the dress rehearsal for all the starters. But I think, especially for the defense, number one, just going back to the inside linebacker spot and seeing this battle between John Bostic, who, as you mentioned, is going to win, and I agree, and Tyler Medikevich, it just really seemed like, though, nobody really wanted to take the main lead in that roster battle and that for that starting role. Is that something you saw, Alex, or am I a little crazy here?
What do you mean when you say no one wanted to take
it just seemed like both those guys really weren't making plays to say, hey, like, this is my spot. Like, I don't think none of them really jump out to me, I guess, is what you're saying. And I think he knew that going in, but to me, I don't know if John Bostic's really that better over than Medikevich based on their play in the preseason so far. Sure, he gives you that veteran presence because he brings that experience, but in terms of talent, I haven't really seen a whole lot between the two of them as far as making consistent plays this preseason.
No, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, I don't think the group's been terrible, especially in a camp setting. I think because you have so much competition there, it's forcing everyone to rise and play to their best ability. But, I think when you get in the game and you just try to project this thing out in the regular season action, it's tough to be fully confident in either of those guys. I think they're pretty similar. Obviously, like you said, Bostic is the veteran, the guy with more experience. The guy that's been there, done that, Medikevich, is a lot more useful. But they're both, physical players. The run fits are going to be strong, generally going to be good tacklers, but going backwards, can they cover? When you blitz the nickel, when you blitz the strong safety, do you have someone that can match up on the number 3, generally the tight end, and carry him down the seam or be able to switch off on somebody or cover in space? Or who's going to be that playmaker that can get you a couple sacks, a couple interceptions, a couple forced fumbles, a couple pass deflections that Shazier was able to bring? Do you have anyone that's even remotely close to that? No, you don't. It's the short answer to that. So that's my concern there. It just, you're going to have to scheme around these inside linebackers. Last year with Shazier, you can put in whatever scheme you want. Full confidence Shazier's going to be able to carry it out. Total 180 this year. You're going to have to manage these guys and scheme everything to pigeonhole those inside linebackers to get boss pick, and make sure that you're not exposing him to something he can't do, and that's going to limit you as a defense, and it's ultimately going to hurt you.
And as we get ready for this game against the Titans Saturday night, Alex, before we move on to the Eagles, what are some things that you're looking at for this game? For me, it's obviously getting a look at Big Ben coming off the injury, seeing how crispy he might be in a few series I'm sure he'll get, and just the offense in general. I want to see more James Conner to continue to see that consistency. And then receivers, too, I love seeing with James Washington just to kind of keep that going. He'll get more reps against more ones because, the Titans will be doing the same thing. Defensively, again, we mentioned about the linebacker issue. I still want to see more consistency from the secondary, too, guys like Artie Burns. And I know Cam Sutton, I want to continue to see the good camp it looks like he's had so far. Back in on this and at safety. What are you looking at for Saturday night?
I think you touched on it well. I mean, I'm not really worried about Ben. I mean, it's not even injury because, again, he wasn't injured. It was just
Yeah, he's bouncing back from that regardless.
With concussion. But it's good just to get the starters out there. Maybe get a little better gauge of the defense. You're going to have guys like Cam Hayward available, Joe Hayden available. Hopefully, TJ Watt can play. That's up in the air. I think you made a good point about Cam Sutton. Mike Hilton is not going to play. He got hurt on the first special team snap he took against Green Bay.
So
it's going to be, I think, Cam Sutton starting in the slot. And that's going to be big for him because he's going to play this year somewhere. I think he's going to be the top backup at any of the cornerback spots, left corner, right corner of the slot. You definitely want to see that and just kind of see this team come together and how they play as a singular unit.
All right, now we go to the Eagles who play tonight. We're recording this on a Thursday to begin Week 3 of the preseason. Eagles got the Cleveland Browns tonight on Fox in the nationally televised game. And, of course, you look at what they've done this preseason, it's virtually not really a whole lot. It's been very sloppy, a lot of penalties, a lot of turnovers, especially in this game against New England, where it was kind of a bad spot for both the Eagles and the Steelers this week, getting pounded when you look at it on the scoreboard. And then number one things you look at is Nick Foles in his first game action since the Super Bowl. Did not look good at all. Then he took the shoulder injury, but thankfully he's okay in case he has to start for Carson Wentz Week 1 against the Atlanta Falcons. So number one thing for me is I want to see a lot more consistency for him and just making better throws, making better reads, finding that accuracy. And offensive line, I just want to see more cohesion overall and consistency from the offense and better execution, which is something Doug Peterson has really harped on, especially in some of those situational football plays, third down, third and long, red zone, all that stuff. Eagles really haven't seen much of that from their starters this whole entire preseason offensively, so you definitely want to see that. And then defensively, I think the pass rush is going to be there. I think the Eagles' defensive line is going to be ferocious, and I think can win them a lot of games, especially early on when you have Carson Wentz coming back from the big injury, too. And this, like the Steelers, the Eagles have a linebacker battle, but this over at the will position, though, in this case, between Kamu Grugier-Hill and Nate Gary, who's going to win that? Both these guys actually, it's been a good battle for the most part. Both guys have had their issues, but both guys are making a lot of plays, too. So I'm curious to see how that ends up. I still think it's going to be Kamu Grugier-Hill that wins this job. I just like his athleticism a little bit better. I think he's a better tackler. I just think he sees the field a little bit better and has better instincts, but that's just me. And then this quarterback battle, too, for Alex. You have Sidney Jones, who I think hasn't had really that great a preseason. I've been a little disappointed with him. I know he's still trying to learn. I think part of this, too, I put on the coaching staff because I think he's better suited on the outside, but they continue to put him in the slot, where I think Jalen Mills is actually a better position to be at. Now, of course, Mills has been hurt, too, so that's also kind of complicated some things. So I'm looking at those types of things as well. But bottom line is I want to make sure Nick Foles is in a good rhythm and has some confidence back in him in case he does have to play Week 1 against Atlanta.
Yeah, you had a good list there. Tell me more about Hill, the linebacker. I know he's been a specialist early in his career, a good athlete. I've been racking my brain trying to figure out if the Steelers go out of house, who could they try to pick up as an athletic linebacker that can cover? Do you think he's going to win the job? I know you kind of hinted at that you do, but two, just tell me about his overall skill set and if you think he's someone that, would be helpful to the Steelers in a true hypothetical.
Well, I don't think he'll be helpful for the Steelers just because I think either way he's going to be on the Eagles' 53-man roster because they're so thin at linebacker right now. And number two, the Eagles going to want to use his special teams value even if he doesn't have that starting role. So I don't think he's going to be any trade bait or if the Eagles just flat out release him or anything like that. But he's a guy that's I think has some size. He is very athletic. He's quick and fast, as our man Mike Mayock likes to point out. I like the way he follows the ball and can recognize things pre-snap. And I just think he's a really good form tackler. Nate Gary, I think, too, is athletic and can tackle as well, but I just don't think he can recognize things as quick as Camus Grugier-Hill can do. And I think Grugier-Hill has another year ahead of a Nate Gary in terms of experience. So
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think that's what
Gary
you
was
get
a
there with him.
safety at Nebraska. If I
Right,
remember.
that's exactly right. And I believe Camus Grugier-Hill wasn't a linebacker either. I don't think he converted from
Illinois,
safety.
he ran like a 4.45.
Exactly right. Yeah, so he definitely has more speed than Nate Gary, but Nate Gary's a guy that can cover too if needed. But I just like the overall package you get more with Grugier-Hill than you get with Nate Gary. And also, if you remember too, Grugier-Hill was Eagles' emergency kicker last year when Jake Elliott suffered the concussion against Dallas on Sunday Night Football last year. If you remember correctly.
Actually,
yeah.
He's got a leg. He's got a little leg.
He does, yeah. He was great last year. But you know what? That's how the kid made it for himself. He's a guy, really, I think just is one of those guys that knows football well, and you can count him in to do any of those types of roles as you saw last year.
One other guy I wanted to ask you about, because I've only seen the Eagles when they played the Steelers, to be honest, but Devontae Bosby, the corner, I think played well, at least in that game. Nearly had a pick six, did well in coverage against James Washington. I know a guy that's 25, I think was been cut by teams like 6 times already throughout his career, just trying to finally get that chance to stick. Is he going to stick this year, or is it going to be another tough cut for him?
I think for depth purposes, I think he's got a chance to make the roster. I don't think he played as well as he did against the Steelers, but he's been making a name for himself in camp. He's been competing with Sidney Jones and Avonte Maddox, too, the Eagles' 4th-round pick from Pitt, for that nickel quarterback spot. So I thought he's had a really good camp overall, but this is a big game for him coming up against the Cleveland Browns here.
Yeah. Any other guys fighting for a roster spot that you're keeping a real close eye on these last 2 weeks?
Well, next for me is running back, because one is obviously nobody's been able to stay healthy, which is a shame because there's a lot of guys that I think have talent that they just need more time, but they haven't been able to stay healthy. You know, Matt Jones, from the guy that the Eagles they signed from the Redskins last year on a 1-year deal. He had some good plays in between the tackles, but he still didn't really impress me a whole lot. He had a couple really bad drops, including one that went for an interception. It was just a simple swing pass out of the backfield from Nate Sudfeld. This is a big game for him. He'll get the opportunity. Wendell Smallwood, I think, has the last chance. But again, I really don't see him make the roster. You and I have talked about that before. And what I love the most about this is Josh Adams will play tonight against the Browns. He did not play against the Patriots last week. Had a lower body injury, according to Doug Peterson. So this is another opportunity for him. And I really think he has the tools to make the team. Again, he has the good size. Can run in between the tackles well. You saw that in Notre Dame, but he's a guy that's also very dangerous out of the backfield too. So I really hope that he has a good game tonight. And then of course Donnell Pumphrey really hasn't played at all this preseason, again with injury. So I think the writing's on the wall for him. So I'm watching the running backs again tonight too to see who steps up. Jay Ajayi picked up a little bit of a nagging injury this week, so he's not going to play. So you're basically just going to have Josh Adams, Matt Jones, and Wendell Smallwood playing this game for the Eagles tonight.
Yeah, I was a big Josh Adams fan coming out of ND. Great story. I think he had a serious injury in high school, almost ended his football career. He bounced back from that. Had some really healthy numbers at Notre Dame, even though the playing time wasn't consistent. He's definitely a straight line-ish downhill kind of guy, but once he gets that, whenever he's 215 pounds, going downhill, I think he's a tough guy to stop when he gets a nice runway to go through. I don't know about everything else. I don't know much about his blocking or his receiving ability, but you found a gem last year in Corey Clement, and I feel like you have a similar story that you're in Josh Adams.
No question. And Josh Adams, too, is also a Philly native, like Corey Clement, Bucks County native. So he's got the home crowd rooting for him again in that regard.
Yeah, that was a great pickup. You guys find running backs the way the Steelers find receivers.
That's very true. It's amazing to me.
Yeah.
So before we wrap it up, Alex, for this week, we've gotten 2 games, and of course you've seen the training camp firsthand of the teams trying to adapt to this, what I think is a stupid rule, and the new lowering the head rule with the helmet. Well, your main thoughts on what you've seen so far? I mean, as I've pointed out on Twitter, you and I have talked about this on Twitter. This is really, I think, going to be a big problem for the NFL that they need to correct very quickly.
Right. I've been sounding that alarm since almost day one. The confusion that this rule, the rule passed, but it wasn't clear on exactly, what was going to be considered a foul and what the penalties were and what was going to be ejectable. They just didn't really have a clear plan from the rule from the get-go, and it's been a mess ever since. And I know it's the preseason. I know that this is the time to make mistakes, to figure out how to get things right, but I just don't trust the NFL to get things right. I think history tells you that. So I know the NFL announced that they weren't making changes, and then they kind of said they were making changes, that incidental contact to the helmet wouldn't be a foul, but what does that even mean? That almost muddies.
Well, it doesn't mean anything because all your incidental contact is going to come from an offensive player lowering his head, which you claimed in the first place you were going to flag them for it all. We haven't seen that one bit this preseason.
Yeah, I think Deadspin had a video of all this with 50 of these infractions called this year, and I think they said 40 of them were on the defense. I think there were a couple others on special teams, and so I think maybe there were 5 on offense. So obviously this is very disproportionate.
That's atrocious. Yeah.
I mean, you would expect the defense to get called more.
No question. But when you said 40-5, I mean that's inexcusable when you're trying to enforce this rule for both sides.
Yeah, no, I mean, and like I said, it may have been this rule may have been passed with good intentions, but when you have just a general, murkiness of the NFL ruling, and how inconsistent it's been, and you have, you lost 4 top officials this year. You lost Hockley, Steratore,
right,
McCauley, and one other guy I'm forgetting. You have a lot of new guys coming into the league right now. So
yeah, it was a bad timing for the NFL to try and do this. I mean, as you mentioned, Alex, I get what they're trying to do. I mean, I'll just cite you one play, before we begin to wrap it up. That I don't know if you saw in the Colts-Ravens game the other night. I forget who was in the Colts, but it was Heap for the Ravens, who was was running for the first down. He tried to leap over a guy, and the player for the Colts, it was number 95, took his helmet, and because Heap's still in the air, to try and bring him down. And in that instance, it's one of those plays where what do you expect the defender to do in that instance? Because if he turns his head, he's going to get run over.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think it's going to be a mess. I think it's going to cost teams games. I think it's going to cost someone a job. I think it's just going to be, they fix the catch rule and then they break this. So it's a net zero kind of game here.
Yeah, it's just been one thing after another, and I think, Alex, you mentioned it well, and how you would fix this on Twitter the other night is you would what was it? You would take the helmet out if. Remind me again what it was.
Yeah, I would just make a small tweak that any lowering of the helmet in initiating contact with an opponent's helmet for any ball carrier or defensive player should be a penalty if it's because the rule is right now it's when you lower your helmet to any part of the opponent's body, it does not have to be helmet-to-helmet contact. And that's called putting sense about putting helmet basically over the shoulder in the last game against Green Bay. So I think you want to eliminate all helmet-to-helmet contact. And I've always thought it was dumb that the NFL had its defensive receiver penalty, which was fine, but then the safety would come down the alley on a running back and go helmet-to-helmet with him, and it was acceptable. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It kind of hits. The running back doesn't have any protection there. So I'm okay with that, but I think the lowering of the helmet, hitting a shoulder or a hip or whatever, it just...
Right, totally agree.
And I want people to have that up. We don't want anything to happen like Ryan Teaser happened last year, but I think there's a middle ground and some other way to deal with it better than what it is. And again, I think it's going to be the consistency of the rule, not the rule itself, is going to be the biggest problem. You just never know how they're going to call it.
Right, and I think the NFL can find more of that consistency by going, what you said, trying to just focus on the more helmet-to-helmet contact, which is why I think was the basic principles of why they tried to create this rule in the first place. But, of course, it's gone in 5,000 different directions, which has obviously not been good so far from what we've seen in the product. But we'll see how things go here as we continue to move on to the preseason, and we cross our fingers, move on into the regular season when it comes to this rule. Well, that's going to wrap it up. Alex, thanks again for the time, and we will be talking to you hopefully next week as we wrap up the preseason.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Good luck to the Eagles, and hopefully everyone's in good health. That's obviously the biggest thing we want to take away. Also, Carson Wentz playing week 1. Yes, no. I know it's not totally decided. But...
I know. Adam Schefter was on 97.5 The Fanatic in Philly yesterday and didn't really give an optimistic look at it, but I still think he's playing. I really do. I know that it's been going back and forth, but if he's ready to do 11 on 11s now, I think he's going to play week 1.
Yeah, I'm almost positive he's going to play at this point because he was getting that work already, and I just don't see him hold him out.
Yeah, and he had gotten that before, and I truly think it was one of those things where the Eagles seen enough once he took that sweeping tackle, whatever it was, near his leg. I think you know what we know we can do. It's just a matter of waiting for the doctors at this point. Let's save him up for get some reps when we're getting ready, really starting to wrap it up for the regular season, which is basically starting with this week. So yeah, I think he's playing week 1. So that's going to do it for this week's edition of the show. You can follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. I'm at Twitter at MCatrillo. And our show Twitter is at NG_NFL. All of our episodes are placed on YouTube at our Next Game, New Game podcast channel. So for Alex Kozora, I'm Matt Catrillo. Enjoy week 3 of the preseason. Thanks for listening to the Next Game, New Game podcast.